We've already done that to some extent. It doesn't mean that they have to do what I tell them to do, but I can gently suggest it, I think. But they've been very, very, very good about incorporating ideas.
Well, we will definitely look forward to that. Now, I am always impressed with the title of the Flavia books. Do those come first, or do the actual story come first?
That's very perceptive, because usually the titles come first and they suggest the story. The first book, The Sweetness at the Bottom of the Pie, had quite an interesting genesis. My wife had bought me at what was it called? It was like a yard sale. It wasn't a flea market. It was a yard sale. She had bought me an old multi-volume dictionary from about 1901 or somewhere around the turn of that century. And it was wonderful. It was one of those old dictionaries that had little pen and ink drawings for many of the items so that you can see what things look like. I took to reading it a lot just for browsing. Whenever I wasn't doing anything else, I would grab a volume of this dictionary and pick it up and just open it at random. Like if you were going to the bathroom or something, it's a good way to catch up on word history. And I had this book one day. For some reason, it was volume 1 that had A to C or something like that. And it fell open at the word crinkle. And my immediate thought was, crinkle, what a good word that is. I haven't heard that for years. I haven't heard anybody say crinkle since I was a child. I wonder why we don't use it more. And in the dictionary, each word had several examples of how it had been used by great writers. And for crinkle, there was an entry for a gentleman named King, who had written in the 1600s a cookery book, which was entirely in rhyme. Using the word crinkle, his quotation went something like, unless some sweetness at the bottom lie, who cares for all the crinkling of the pie? And instantly I thought, that's book title. The Sweetness at the Bottom of the Pie. It's a book title. And as it turned out, I didn't use it for years, maybe 10. This preceded the book by a very long time. And when I was writing, taking Flavia's dictation madly, not knowing what it was, about halfway through the book, you can almost find the page if you read it. It suddenly struck me, I'm writing The Sweetness at the Bottom of the Pie.
That's great.
So that was the first book. The other ones tended to be things from my random reading. I would just happen upon very fortuitous phrases when I was looking for a title. It's magic the way that works. I can just go to the library or go to my library and pick out a book and just thumb through it, and the title will leap off the page sooner or later. The weed that strings the hangman's bag, and a red herring without mustard, and I have Sick of Shadows, which is Tennyson, of course.
And Find a Private Place.
Yeah, each one of them. In the beginning, the publishers didn't think much of them. They said nobody will get it. The titles are way too long, way too long. But after The Sweetness at the Bottom of the Pie got on the New York Times bestseller list, everybody said, "What great titles!"
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I love the titles you come up with.
So I've had no further objections about them. In fact, I think they kind of look forward to them a little bit.
We do.
Good. Yeah, I have fun with them. The new one, which is the next one, which is coming out in January next year, is called The Golden Tresses of the Dead.
Oh, look forward to that.
I just received the advanced reading copies a couple of days ago, and it's a very nice looking book. And that's the 10th one, so
yes.
You can see that I've been keeping my nose to the grindstone.
Now, how do you think Flavia would do in today's world with the internet and all the technology we have today that she didn't have back then?
Yeah, I think she'd be plotting to poison all the politicians.
I knew I liked her.
Oh, she's quite a girl. She's quite a girl.
I think she would look askance at the world the way it is today, as I do. I could totally agree with her or see her agreeing with me, whichever comes first. But Flavia and I are like the chicken and the egg, so it's hard to tell. But I think we can safely say that poison would play a part.
Oh, of course.
Alan, we have a lot of first-time writers that listen to our podcast, and we were wondering if you could talk a bit about when you got your first book published and some of trials and tribulations that came along with that.
Sure. Well, as I say, I think I was 69 when the first book was published. It took a long time. Someone had told me years before that it would take 10 years to write a book and get it published, and they were wrong. It took 15. But I think there are several things that add up to good advice. I don't claim to be an expert on it, but I can speak about my own experience. And I think the first thing is to write the best book that you possibly can, that you write it and polish and polish and polish and polish until you can polish no more, is very important. It also helps to be able to get it to the right person, if you can find a way of doing that. But at the same time, I firmly believe that if you write the best possible book that you can, and it is a good book, I don't think any editor or publishing house would ever turn it down. There are so many manuscripts received that are not good, and of course they can tell from the first page whether it's going to be publishable or not. So you need to grab the editor right on the first page with the quality of the writing as much as anything. I know people talk about writing gripping narrative hooks and, have somebody's throat slit in the first 2 lines, but that isn't important. It's the quality of the writing that I think is absolutely paramount. And then the next thing would be to finish it. It's more difficult than you can ever imagine to finish a book. When you start out writing it, you're full of bubbles and you think it's going to be fun, and you don't realize that it might take 10,000 hours to do this, and you have to be writing about something that you can stay enthused about for all of that time. You have to don't be beat down by the book. So in other words, you just have to write and write a lot and clean it up. Another thing is to take chances, do things that nobody has ever done before. Editors love that. They don't hate it. They don't want it to be unreadably wild. I mean, you can imagine what Joyce's publishers thought when they saw the manuscript of Finnegan's Wake.
Yeah.
Ulysses, and of course goes on to be an all-time classic. So take chances and have fun with it and write about things not only that you know about, but things that you're very interested in so that you can get through the draggy times. And, but above all, or underneath all, I guess, is keep your behind in the chair. That's the hard part.
Yeah, that's great advice for our writers. One of our members, Kathy, would like to ask you a follow-up question.
Okay.
Well, it's basically about what you were inspired by, or who you were inspired by more accurately. What authors inspired you to write and who you emulate?
Oh, my goodness. There are so many. I would have to send you a library from early years, Mark Twain, from middle years, people who write gloriously like T.H. White. In later years, people who are just off the scale. And Angela Carter, for example, might be surprising, but there are a lot of books that I love. I like things about things that I know nothing about, so that I can learn about them. I discovered Patrick O'Brien's seafaring novels, which are gorgeously written. He based them on Jane Austen. And Patrick O'Brien's sailing novels, I had to tear them away from my wife. She was reading ahead of me, and I think there were about 12. There wound up being about 20 of them in all, and they're absolutely magnificent. as far as historical writing goes, there was another author named George MacDonald Fraser who wrote a series of novels about Flashmen, who was an absolute cad that lived during the time of the Napoleonic Wars. And his research and his capturing of atmosphere and language is just, I can't describe it. I can only tell you that they are one of two books, and I'll tell you in a minute who wrote the other one, but only two books have ever literally made me fall out of bed laughing. George MacDonald Fraser with Flashman was one, and the other one you have probably guessed is Garrison Keillor.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yes. So, yeah, very, very funny.
Highly recommended.
Do you have any upcoming events or book signings that you'd like our listeners to know about?
I don't write at the moment. As the years go by and I age, inevitably, we're getting up there, and travel is not as easy as it was even 10 years ago. It's so much more difficult and stressful to travel that I have turned down a lot of requests to go to literary events or book signings, simply because it's just too difficult to do nowadays. So I tend not to do them. I'm focusing more on doing things like communicating by Skype with libraries, which I am happy to do, or to do interviews as we're doing, or just chatting as we're doing now, and get away from the big time book touring. I did a huge amount of touring with the Flavia books. I was, as Hank Snow used to say in his song, I've been everywhere, man. I was at Croatia, Finland, Germany, you name it, Malta. I've been at Oxford to talk about the Flavia books, which I think is the ultimate.
Yes.
So at the moment, I'm laying low, let's say.
Now, can I ask you a off-the-wall question?
Sure.
Do you have any plans, or is it feasible that someday you'll write a book about Dogger and his adventures before he came to live at Buckshaw?
Oh, that's a good idea. Yes.
There you go.
Yeah, because we're very intrigued by Dogger.
Yes.
Well, you're going to love the new book.
Oh, good.
Absolutely going to love the new book when it comes out. And Dogger, I don't think I would be giving away any secrets, because I think the thumbnail sketch of the book is on some of the websites on the internet. You'll be interested to hear in the doings of a little firm that has been founded called Arthur Dogger and Associates Discreet Investigations.
Very interesting.
They're already at it hard.
That's wonderful.
That's great.
Well, Alan, we cannot thank you enough for doing this, and we wish you luck with the future of Flavia and any other projects you have. And this episode will be the In Agatha's Footsteps. It shall be coming out soon. Please look for that.
And we'll be looking for the next Flavia book.
In January, right?
In January?
Thank you. I'm honored to be in Agatha's footsteps. I'll just have to watch and make sure that I don't step in any poison.
Oh, definitely.
Good.
Thank you again so much.
You're very welcome.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Oh, that was brilliant. That was a great interview.
Yes, Alan, he is welcome on our show anytime.
Yes, and we thank him so much for taking time out of his schedule to talk with us. And now, let's get our party started.
To celebrate Agatha's birthday, we bought each other small gifts to launch our In Agatha's Footsteps.
Yes.
And what we'll do is we will open them and describe them, but we will also put pictures on our website so you can see what those gifts are.
Okay. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
All right.
All right. The first gift is for Anne, and it's from me.
Ooh, I like presents. Agatha Christie bag. Isn't that great? Oh, thank you.
There's something in the bag.
There's something in the bag. Uh-oh.